And we are going live. Yes, indeed. It is 10:52 on the Pacific coast of North America, and talking with two good friends and colleagues. They're in Canada and they're in South Africa. And we are welcoming you all to the Parks Inspiring Solutions Hangout for July 31st, 2014. Hopefully, one of two conversations today. You'll have to get the confirmations for our afternoon session. That's morning in Oceania. But we are doing these hangouts more or less on a monthly basis and talking about parks and talking about the upcoming World Parks Congress. We cordially invite viewers to submit questions. There's a little Q&A app if you're watching on the YouTube channel or on Google Plus. And again, we'd love to have your feedback. You'll find more information about parks and tapas and the World Parks Congress all there on the Planeta Wiki, as well as many other websites. And we'll get to them and we'll try to provide some updated show notes. So thank you very much for watching. Let's get this started, and let's kick off with the new guy. For the very first Google Hangout, we have Bob Kane in Canada. Is that Thunder Bay?
Thunder Bay, that's right, in Ontario on Lake Superior.
Wow.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing?
I'm recently retired, and I'm starting to do some consulting in the human dimensions of natural resource management. That would include parks, protected areas, forests, wildlife, and so on. So I'm sort of bridging between the old and the new at the moment.
Very, very well said. And just a quick note, and as I said before we started the live stream, many thanks. The links you're posting on Twitter and LinkedIn, our Tapas group there, just so helpful. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're curating and sharing some of those park-related links?
Yeah, well, I guess I was led to LinkedIn by an ex-student who felt that this was a very good networking thing. So I got involved, and then I thought, well, there doesn't seem to be a lot of social science stuff being done about natural resources here, and there should be. I was going to, at one point, create a group about parks and protected areas, the human dimensions of parks and protected areas, but I thought that would be a little bit too narrow. So I decided that I would certainly talk about that, but also talk about some of the other aspects where the sort of human dimensions aspects of resource management were important. Forests, fish, wildlife, and so on.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for joining this Hangout.
Glad to be here.
And moving over toward the east, further east, over to South Africa, Anna Spensley, good day to you, and can you introduce yourself?
Good day to you too, and thanks for organizing this hangout. Yeah, I'm Anna. I'm a tourism consultant based in by the beach in South Africa, at Ballito. Beautiful place to be. And I'm currently the chair of the TAPAS group, the Tourism and Protected Areas Specialist Group. And I'm going away to the Drakensberg Mountains this weekend, so enjoying going to a protected area here in South Africa.
Very good, very good. Can you tell us, paint a little picture, where are these mountains?
They're sort of in the heart of South Africa and wrap around the eastern side of Lesotho. And there's a trans-frontier conservation area called the Malotti Drakensberg, where you can go do beautiful hikes, do climbing, there's fly fishing, horse riding. It's really spectacular. People sometimes ask when they're going on a trip which is the most beautiful part of the Drakensberg that they should go to and prioritize, but it's all beautiful.
Very good. I'm just kind of clicking away in the back. Some people are asking on the Google Play when we're beginning this Hangout. I'll make sure that we've invited Lloyd, and hopefully we'll be getting the people in who have been invited. And those who are watching, again, are welcome to post a question in the Q&A app, and we'll be making this a smoother and smoother process. So, thank you, smartphone, for informing me of people waiting for this to begin. Bob, this is your very first Hangout, so you had a couple technical glitches, but were you able to get in okay?
Sorry, can you say that again?
I said you had a few technical glitches to get into this Hangout, but at the end of the day, what was your solution?
My solution was to fire up my Apple MacBook Pro, and it went around most of the difficulties. It may well be that my desktop machine had Skype so embedded in it, because I usually use Skype on that machine, that I couldn't get it shut down properly. But it's not on the MacBook Pro, so here I am.
I wanted just to introduce this new widget that we're using today in this Hangout, and that's something called Showcase. And supposedly you'll be able to see a little link to our information about Tapas. Anna, can you introduce the Tapas group and tell us a little bit about the history and what the current status is of Tapas?
Okay, the Tapas group is a group of volunteer professionals working globally on issues of tourism and protected areas. We have about 250 members on all continents, and with a range of people from government and private sector, academia, NGOs, and so on. And we as a specialist group of the World Commission on Protected Areas, we're tasked with developing knowledge and sharing it and building capacity globally on tourism and protected areas. And this we try to do through our network. And at the moment we're developing a series of publications, including a revision of the best practice guidelines on tourism and sustainable tourism and protected areas, and we're going to have a launch event at the World Parks Congress for that. And we're also contributing to other publications, such as the revised best practice guidelines on transboundary tourism, and also a revision of Graham Warboy's book on governance in protected areas.
Very good. I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share here and introduce people to our Tapas page on LinkedIn. We were discussing this earlier, how Bob has been posting some information. This is a LinkedIn page now with 116 members. One of the developments in the past 2 or 3 years that I've been a member of Tapas, after the kind invitation from Anna, is to provide and make sure that we have the spaces on the social web to share information about tourism and parks around the world. So if we just look at this LinkedIn page, we see a number of reports and links and stories about parks and protected areas that members have been posting. It's just one of several places that we have this information about Tapas. Here's one of Bob's posts. Again, it's very easy to access the group and again to like or comment about these stories. Bob, can you say anything else about how people can be or should be using LinkedIn?
Well, I think there's two main ways. I mean, certainly people should be encouraged to submit to groups like Tapas, but they should also be encouraged to comment on things that have been submitted, because sometimes the comments bring a lot of background information that is relevant to the topic or relevant to a particular location. So I would think that those two possibilities are both important for Tapas and indeed for other groups.
Now, Bob, are you using the Facebook group at all?
Am I using a Facebook group? Yes, but it is essentially a local group here in Thunder Bay that is a partnership with Lakehead University, with Ontario Parks, at least Ontario Parks in this part of the province, and the regional office of Parks Canada. And we're trying to focus, not necessarily successfully, on local sorts of issues. So in that particular group on Facebook, there's a good deal of material, for example, on the relationship between parks and First Nations.
Well, very, very interesting. Anna, do you have any comments about these groups and these places for sharing information?
Yeah, I think they're more and more useful. And like our Facebook site, I think we've got how many members at the moment? We have, oh, I've lost it. Let me try and show you the Facebook.
Please.
Let me try and get on there. Let's see if that's working. So we have 665 likes at the moment, which is fabulous. So what's great about it is that although we have 250 members of the group, this has a much greater outreach to far more people. And here, Ron in particular is very good at posting information about what's new and what's happening in parks. And we have a series of links to other agencies also working on conservation and tourism, which is great. And this is really open to anybody who wants to use it.
So you do not have to be a Tapas member to access the LinkedIn or the Facebook page.
Exactly.
But our goal is that if you have a professional interest in parks and tourism, if you're working in a park, if you're an academic doing research, if you're a consultancy, that certainly you use these groups as a entry point into joining that Tapas group. So Anna, say something again so we see your screen.
Oh, does it come back automatically? Oh, yes.
There you go. Perfect.
Oh, another cool thing.
I would point out and underscore, emphasize the point that Bob made, that we really would like to see more people posting original material or sharing information. That's a great deal of what I do on Facebook, just sharing what other park authorities have already posted online. But also, if we want to get deeper into the subject, then certainly to do some commenting and asking questions and doing a little bit more depth and follow through. But that again requires a certain level of experience and understanding. All right, so now that we've done all of this web gadgetry underway, I'd like to address and I'd like to open up to your questions or your suggestions for the people we have on the screen. But let's talk a little bit about the World Parks Congress. And I know you're attending this event. Can you give us, in a nutshell, what the Congress does and what will come out of this event?
Okay, let me just find the website for it too. Okay, so the World Parks Congress takes place very seldom, every 10 years. It takes place or thereabouts, and it's really a gathering of people who are members of the IUCN, but also others who want to talk about issues around protected areas globally. I'm going to show you the web page for the Parks Congress, which is here.
WorldParksCongress.org.
WorldParksCongress.org, yeah. So this tells us we have 104 days until the World Parks Congress. So there's a range of events taking place at this. They have some presentations being made, side events, launches. They're going to have display areas where people are showing videos of and footage of protected areas and transboundary areas. There's still time now to sign up and go to the Congress. And they're also doing a series of field trips as well, where you can go and basically be a tourist, see the protected areas of Australia, and be guided around by people who really understand it well, which I think is really inspiring. And there are members of the Tapas group who will be having events there. We're having, as I mentioned, a launch event for the best practice guidelines, and there'll be panel discussions on concessions in protected areas. There'll be sessions on healthy people, healthy parks, on World Heritage is one of the cross-cutting themes of the Congress, for example. And we're hoping to put together a journal special edition as well, as a result of some of the papers on tourism that are coming out of the Congress. And myself and Sue Snyman are basically putting that together. And we're hoping for some great contributions.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. That looks like a lovely event. And for people who are paying attention to it, that again is worldparkscongress.org. And the hashtag is simply hashtag World Parks Congress. Anna, let me ask you, on that website, if you can, where are you going on that website for updated information? Can you give us just a little bit of a tour?
I'm not sure how they post updates, but this page is on the program, and they've got a preliminary program. I'll show you what it looks like. It's a bit complicated to look at because they have so many things that are happening. And Ron, do you know how they're posting updates to people? Is it coming through social media, or you just have to look every so often?
No, you have to look every so often. I know they have their Twitter account. They're also on Facebook with their updates. They're also on Google Plus with updates. Again, there's so much happening.
Yeah. So, for an example, this is the first day of the Parks Congress, and they have each of these different color blocks shows one of the different streams of the Congress and the different events that are taking place within it. And I understand that for people who are going, they'll be able to use an online tool to be able to schedule events and find out where they're going when, and basically plan their meeting well. But as it always is, that some of the most interesting conversations and discussions take place in the corridors rather than in the actual event. So I'm sure there will be a lot of that happening too.
All sorts of wonderful conversation by collision.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they've got a full program. They've got e-posters, pavilions, and workshops as well, so training sessions that you can go to.
Now, if you look at that screen, can you say something? What I find interesting at the bottom, they've done very well. If you look at the bottom of the screen, they do have little buttons that you can share that information. When you find a specific, a page with specific information you're looking for and you want to share it, again, you're able to do that through Google+, Twitter, and Facebook.
So let me do that. Why don't I try and share this on... Okay.
Yeah, walk us through, Anna. What exactly you're clicking and what's happening?
Can you see what I'm clicking or not? Or maybe it didn't show. I just clicked on the share button for Facebook and asked for it to share on the Tapas Facebook page. So I'm just going to reload this and see if it's there. Yes. So that's appeared now on our Facebook page.
Now, that's what I really like. It does make it quite easy to take information and share it to another relevant page. Again, give credit where it's due, so well done.
Now, if I learn how to do this to link it to Twitter as well, then I'm quite happy. That's the one I struggle with.
I think Yeah, the Twitter conversation I find again very useful, but you have to be following some of the people um, who are taking part in the event. And and again, if you're not engaged by Twitter, you're following the wrong people. And it also, it does require you to skim. So, not everything that not everything that Bob says is of particular interest to me. But where I truly value what Bob is posting is that around half of the stuff I haven't seen elsewhere.
Oh,
So,
that's good.
thank you for sharing it. That's great. Um, and I think the challenge, I think the challenge beyond the World Parks Congress is figuring out, the strategy of conversation. It's all well and good to throw links back and forth to one another, but how do we get a little bit more depth, or what are we going to create together with this? Um,
If I may, Ron, I think one of the things that's happening at the Congress this time, at least as I understand it from afar, is that some things which were begun several years ago are continuing at the Congress. I'm thinking of the Healthy Parks, Healthy People initiative and conference that occurred in Australia, I think in 2010 maybe. The fact that that is ongoing and is getting a higher profile, I think, at the World Parks Congress is really important. That provides some of the depth that you spoke about. And certainly the website that Healthy Parks, Healthy People have provides a lot of background information about the topic itself. You can call something like that a topic, as well as the conference. And here it is turning up again at the World Parks Conference.
and as an aside, I met Diana Allen, who was with the with National Park Service in the United States, and one of the partners in this stream. They're going to hold the U.S. Park Service is holding their Healthy Parks, Healthy People, Healthy Parks, Healthy People Congress in July 2015 in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yep.
So, there is this embedded continuity. So, again, all kudos to the people who are making that happen.
Yep.
Well, I'm checking our Q&A app and finding, well, 0 questions from the studio audience. So again, well, thank you, everybody. As I forewarned Anna and Bob, we do get our mid single digit viewership for the live webcast. But I would ask that if people have comments after watching this video later on, please post it there, and we'll figure out other ways to enhance this conversation. But boy, what I wouldn't give for a good, pertinent, relevant question from somebody right now. We have the Q&A app, but what good is it doing if no one's clicking on it and asking a good question?
Well,
Okay, I have a question.
I don't know if it's pertinent or relevant. My question would be, so what? If we're having this World Parks Congress every 10 years, does it have any impact on what goes on out in the real world in the space between those 10 years?
It's a very good question. I mean, at the last Parks Congress, which is the first and only other one I've been to in Durban in 2003, there was the Durban Accord that was released by the countries who made various commitments to conservation in protected areas. I don't know if at the next Parks Congress they have a kind of a monitoring of how that has done in the field. What did happen, how much of it was implemented.
We see that in terms of this event, we know that they are moving ahead to something that they'll be calling the Promise of Sydney. And what the Promise of Sydney is or will be is something that will be defined and developed at the Congress. But Bob, I'd agree with you. The question I have for any of these events is, well, what is the legacy and what's the outcome? Frankly, I've gotten just very tired of going to events just to go to an event. I'd like to be able to come back with something or share something or see something. of which we have a great deal of pride. And I think I'm not going to address this specific Congress, but I think we see far too many events being held as events. The only thing that I'm pestering the organizers for is that there is some sort of a live stream video feed, because if parts of the Congress can be broadcast or webcast live, if we have a chance to see more of this take place, then I think we in the public realm, or as the public, whether it's as media or academics or people working in the parks, I think we have more ability to call people to be accountable for what they said during the Congress. So if you're going to increase funding or increase protection, or again, maybe a common interest of ours, increase the connection between parks and indigenous peoples. To what degree do indigenous peoples have rights to say no, you're not coming into this area? Or to what degree do indigenous people say, you know what, we want tourism, and we want this responsible tourism? Now, my question, and it leads into an online conference that I'm hosting next week with various partners called Indigenous Peoples Week. We rarely hear about what offerings and services and tours are available from indigenous peoples. And this is not my Congress happening in Sydney, but where I'm going to be paying attention, where I'll be listening very intently, is where these circles intersect. And what I'll be saying to people is, again, if you're an indigenous person in this protected area and you don't want people to come, fine. I'm not talking about visiting or promoting visitation. But if you are talking about visitation, again, how do we get on board and how do we support these efforts? But all of that really happens if we have, throw me a bone. If the Congress is held behind closed doors, we'll read about it later on, but there's no way of interacting. And I'm hoping that we have a really good, solid foundation of interacting at this Congress.
Well, one of the sessions is on Indigenous traditional knowledge and culture, so I would hope that in the selection process for events during that, they've taken careful consideration of making sure traditional knowledge is being actually exhibited by the people who own it and who host it, including from Australia.
Well, what we're seeing, Anna, and I on part of TAPAS, I attended the World Parks Planning Congress in Cuernavaca. Tourism is not considered, what do you call it? The cutting. Help me out here. It's not a major stream. It's not a major stream, and it's not a cross-cutting theme.
Cutting issue. Yeah.
And so, to me, it's so much of where we talk about tourism is shoehorning the topic into these other topics.
Yeah.
Same thing with. I'll say this, and I'll shut up. Same thing with healthy parks, healthy people. The only way we get healthy people and healthy parks is by the healthy people visiting the parks. That's called tourism. But we don't call it tourism at the event. But be that as it may, there will be a lot of these little niches, and I know other people have other interests. And again, I'm hoping that thanks to some video and some good coverage, that we will be able to follow the topics of interest to us.
Mm-hmm. I think to some extent, the issue of tourism in parks runs into one of those old things that academics are famous for, namely the sort of siloing of this topic or that topic and not connecting it to anything else. And certainly we know that tourists they produce benefits in surrounding areas. We also know that depending on the kind of tourists, they have impacts inside protected areas. Well, how is it that we cannot consider these things at the same time? We don't have much in the way of models that will allow us to make that kind of consideration. And so we fall back on talking about ecosystem-based management, as if there are no people that are on that ecosystem.
Anna? I was just thinking about some of the protected areas here where when they talk about health and well-being, whose health and well-being are they talking about really? Is it Is it everybody? Is it people living in protected areas? Is it people visiting the protected areas? Is it all of that? Because, historically there was a big move, particularly in Africa, to remove the indigenous people from the protected areas, and leave the areas for wildlife or hunting. And that has changed, thank goodness. People are getting their land back, are using it for conservation and tourism. But I wonder, even now, with this theme in the Congress, whose health are they going to be talking about? Even now you see protected areas in southern Africa where people are still being moved out of them. So it's an interesting issue.
Well, when you think about tourism as a whole, rarely do we talk about the locals. Luxury tourism. Well, is it luxurious for the locals, or is it luxurious for the visitor? And there is a lacking of a holistic model that appreciates both sides of the equation. Before the Ecotourism Summit in 2002, there was so much of a talk about local autonomy and local this and local that, and you just wanted to remind these people that the locals don't have a job if you don't have tourists coming. And I remember one conversation in Ecuador where the woman said, ecotourism would be great if we just didn't have the tourist. It's two sides of the coin, and you're just not going to get this. But I'd say again, the people who are really missing out are the locals. We're not really viewing things from their side. And I would say not just in parks, not just in ecotourism, but across the board. And strangely enough, I think that's what people are seeking out. It's the success of websites like Couchsurfing, or earlier this year we did a whole series just on food and tourism. And there's this whole industry where people are using their smartphones and their Facebook apps, etc., to make reservations with people so they can eat in their kitchen. So how do we bring those streams together? That it is the value of what's local, but you better have visitors if you want to talk about some income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's hundreds of community-based tourism enterprises.
Wait a second. Anna.
Go ahead, Anna.
Sorry, Bob. There's hundreds of community-based tourism enterprises, particularly in Africa, that often don't really work. You may develop a directory of them, and then within 6 months to a year, none of the email addresses are working. You can't get in contact with people by phone. If you wanted to, things have changed. People have moved on. So for me, it's how do we make sure that people operating these businesses know how to keep current and know how to keep potential customers informed and keep underground. And it's a huge knowledge development and capacity building issue.
And I think we've come to realize that unless local people find a benefit in a park or a protected area, then they're not going to support it. And so that benefit might in fact be through tourism. It might be jobs for children, their children, but it needs to be something. And the idea that we can just sort of put a big fence up and talk only about protecting biodiversity simply isn't acceptable anymore. Certainly it isn't acceptable in the developing countries of the world, and even in a country like Canada it's not acceptable anymore, because certainly First Nations and Inuit people simply won't buy it.
Yeah, here sometimes the wildlife is really dangerous, so fences of some description can help quite a lot. And in some instances where there are people living inside the protected areas, they fence the people in to keep them safe from, elephants and so on.
Mm-hmm.
No, I guess if I had a request on my wish list is that we would have some sort of Parks and Tourism 101 where we'd have a conversation about these places and these issues, and kind of again explain to people here are the issues, and here's what you might see, here's what you're going to see, and here are the connections. Earlier this week, the website Outbounding held a fantastic conversation hangout about captive animals and tourism. And again, the question would be, to what degree do the captive marine parks, harm the dolphin or whale populations more than they're helping? Or in the case of South Africa and Southern Africa, where we see these Cannes lion hunts that have become such a black mark in the news. But how do you get how do you do these Cannes lion safaris? You first get the lions used to humans by having petting zoos. But we don't have, again, I'll go back to lack of information. We don't have the information for the traveler so that they can make some informed decisions. Am I visiting something that's really eco, really sustainable, really responsible? Or, by visiting this aquarium, by visiting this marine park, am I, leading to the death of these marine animals? And it's not a black and white issue where every place is going to be the same. But I'd hope we'd have a better conversation about the permutations of these examples.
Are there any certification bodies that look at hunting or that look at zoos and where captive animals are held? I know certification for accommodation enterprises and activities, but those things I don't know.
That's a question where we need these sort of dialogues and conversation, because again, it's going after an accommodation and certification, that's pretty easy. But what are you going to go see? What are the activities? And do you recognize the amount of torture inflicted on the elephants to provide an elephant theme park or this or that? And I'm not the expert here, but I will be paying attention and really asking that those topics come up for discussion. Chris Mercer, I believe, from Cannes Lion, who's been campaigning on that issue, was basically asking the folks attending the Indaba in South Africa, would you please, could we see a list of where these places are, and what he would like to see is a way of closing them. Because if you're raising, these animals just to be shot, I think there are mixed messages for the tourist. I'm not saying, and that has to be discussed. And it's not an easy equation. I'm not going to be the person promoting pro-hunting, although I think it can be done well. But it can be also done excruciatingly poorly. Like any of these things. You can have terrible indigenous tourism, or you can have really fine indigenous tourism. We need to be better informed.
And of course, we have the situation which is fairly common, where local people are impacted by tourists coming in. And if those tourists are very different from local people, then the impact can be, well, certainly negative on local people and perhaps on the tourists themselves. An example, when the National Marine Conservation Area was being established here on Lake Superior, local people were really split about the idea of tourism. For some of those people, they thought that it was sort of Disneyland kind of tourism, mass tourism, that would simply overwhelm the small towns that are on the north shore of Lake Superior. And Parks Canada was able to assure them that, in fact, that wouldn't be the case. And then they were concerned that the people that would come in would be very different in terms of their values than they themselves, the local people, were. I mean, they were worried, would they no longer be able to hunt? Would they no longer be able to operate powerboats out on the lake? These kinds of things, the difference between tourists and local people and their values and ways of life can often be quite dramatic. Doesn't need to be, and perhaps maybe you want to see dramatic differences as a tourist, but maybe not all tourists want that.
Agreed. Well, this has certainly been a far-ranging and fairly in-depth conversation. I'd like to wind up in the next few minutes. Are there any topics that you folks would like to discuss before we wrap up?
No, just one question. My question for Ron. In your vision for how well communicated the Parks Congress could be, what would that look like? If it was perfect communication, social media at its tip top most, what would be happening? What are we aiming for? What do we want to ask the organizers to provide for us?
I'll give you a few ideas, and again, I think this has to be brainstormed with the organizers, and it has to be brainstormed with some participants, and I think it has to be brainstormed with some people like Bob who are not going to attend the event. You know, at the World Parks Congress planning meeting, we heard a lot about how the communication and the outcomes of the how the outcomes of the Congress really have to benefit the decision makers and the people who are, you know, deciding on budgets or making laws and making sure that things are a little bit more smoothly run in the future for that elite level of policy. And the other conversation was, well, how do we bring this down to the ground? You know, how do we make this make sense to people who are visiting parks or who live in or near parks? You know, what sort of resources are we going to come out of the Congress for locals, for that group of the people? And I think we have to think of both. I think we have to talk about both of those target audiences, as disparate as they are. That said, you know, my suggestion for improving the communication for the Congress has to be, you know, something like this: an unscripted conversation. I'd like to invite the organizers and other speakers and participants to join future Hangouts. I think these independent conversations have great value. Second, in terms of what we're going to actually get from the Congress itself, live streaming video, whether it's from the plenaries to some of the discussions. You know, we're not. There's no reason why you can't have live video from these workshops, from these conversations. That if we were to think it through, we could get a team of volunteers to help create a real-time transcription, so that if you have a live streaming video, you could have the conversation being typed in by people like myself, if the conversation is morning in Australia, that we'd have, again, some sort of resource for people later on. I'm a strong believer that we have to make sure that the information is available in multiple languages, but how are we going to translate if we don't have transcription in English? So, and the pricing, the official pricing for official, translators at these events, and I understand, no doubt, good value, but are tremendously expensive. If we could create some sort of a group that would volunteer to do some sort of real-time transcription, I think that would be an ideal plus.
If I'm taking notes in sessions I'm in, I can take notes and put them on a Google document. Is that the easiest way to do it?
That's the first step, yeah.
And we've requested wireless internet in the sessions that we are on. I don't know how the video would work. If you take a small webcam or something, but all possible.
You know, there's a page on Planet, the Planeta Wiki about live streaming, and it can be all sorts of price ranges and different options. For the COP11 in Hyderabad, India, I just took my iPod Touch phone, connected to a service called Ustream, clicked record, and we were able to webcast the whole workshop. You can say, oh, but the video is blurry, or the sound is not the best, or this or that. But fine, it costs absolutely nothing extra. But what we can do, Anna, is to make sure that we know the times of the TAPAS events. Mm-hmm. That we make sure that at the very least there's some live note taking. But again, hopefully that the Wi-Fi works there. That if anyone has a laptop, they pop open the laptop, they open up Ustream or Livestream, and they're webcasting the conversation. I did that at COP11 for our workshop, as well as a couple of events hosted by the IUCN CEC, the Communications and Environmental Communication Division. But none of this matters if we don't have some sort of coordination ahead of time.
Mm.
You know, it's not just going to happen because, you know, you open up a Google Docs and no one knows about it. It'll happen if, you open up the Google Docs and a few of us have access to it and can make it into a living, breathing, and really useful resource. That, and as I say, that would be, the number one suggestion. Because this Congress will affect people, so many more people outside the room. And we have the technology now to make it available. All right, let's do it.
Let's make it happen.
Bob, any final comments, questions on your side?
Lots of questions, but nothing now.
Okay, listen, we're going to try to do this hangout again in the near future. And again, I consider this a good practice for our interest in the World Parks Congress. But Anna and I are talking about a longer-term strategy connecting tourism and parks. I think we've discussed this, Anna. So I'm not going to come up with this is my idea. It's not. But we need to have some sort of a strategy that goes for a few years. What sort of information and communication infrastructure do we want to really benefit people who are visiting, managing, and living in these parks? So ideas are welcome, and I think that'll be the role for Tapas to come up with some viable ideas and to move forward with them. So I will thank you for your time, and we'll stop the broadcast here. Thank you both for your time, and any final comments? Final?
Thank you, Ron, for organizing this. It's very nice to meet you both.
Okay, well, thank you both, and Bob, great to see you finally.
And you too. And you too, Anna.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.